Hey there guys, Coach Brandon here again. We are moving on to week 3 of our closed guard chapter. We've spent the last couple weeks looking at breaking our opponent's posture with a knee pull. That's always going to be the strongest form of posture breaking. And then once we've broken their posture, we look at taking their elbows in one of 3 positions. Across the center line, where we can go into side scissors and back attacks, and if they drive into us to take away our back attack opportunities, then we can sweep them. We can take the elbow to the center line and climb the legs up high, locking over the shoulder for a top lock. Out of the top lock, we have arm bar opportunities, and once again, because the arm is brought in toward and across the center line, we have sweeping opportunities, because again, it's been brought in. So out of both the top lock and the side scissor, because the elbow's in toward the center line, they can't base out. Sweeps are very easy, as well as submission attacks. Now, moving on to week 3. We can't get our opponent's elbow to the center line using outside position, so we take it out and away from the center line with a clamp. Okay, I'll give you a brief introduction into what this looks like, and then we'll talk through a lot of the nitty-gritty details. Let's go about 45 degrees here. Put you right about here, perfect. So here from the clamp, or from the closed guard, I break his posture down, and we get into the clamp position, where I've isolated Graydon's left arm away from his head and his right arm, so it's hard for him to connect his 2 hands. Right now his arms are vulnerable because if he tries to connect his 2 arms together, he physically can't do it. My body's in the way. Okay? So that's the benefit of the clamp. We're going to have triangle chokes out of clamp, as well as a number of other submission opportunities that we go over. Triangle is always going to be number 1 though. So let's go into some details here. Once again, we saw we can take our opponent's arm all the way across center line for side scissor. Take it to the center line for the top lock. I'm going into arm bars. And if my opponent fights that, now I can take it out and away from the center line. As we're talking about this, let's talk about inside and outside control and how that works for me. When I want to bring my opponent's arm in toward the center line or across the center line, I usually use a variation of outside control. My hand here outside of the elbow to apply inward pressure. I use this to either take the back, set up arm bars, or because I have his arm in toward the center, we can start sweeping our opponent down in that direction. So I use outside control to take my opponent's arms in toward and across the center line. If I want to take limbs out and away from the center line so I can isolate limbs away from the body, we generally do that using inside control. So here, Graydon's 2 arms are locked into my ribs. I go to break his posture, but his heel of his hand is dug into my ribs, and I can't break the posture. I'm going to take my 2 arms in underneath of his arms, so that my hands have inside position on his wrists. From here, I'm going to slide my wrists up my body, and that's going to take his hands off my chest. Now his hands are no longer there as a base of support. So when I go to pull my knees into my chest, my knee pull becomes very effective. If his hands are on my body, my knee pull doesn't do anything. But if I get these hands out and away from the body, and now he's not hands on the chest, now the knee pull is incredibly effective. Okay? So I take my 2 hands inside underneath his arms. When I go to break his posture, I don't want to take my hands up and away like so. Graydon can now pummel his hands inside my biceps, and now he's pinned my biceps to the floor. He can begin the process of standing up and opening my guard. But if I take my wrists in and I slide my wrists up my body, now when Graydon goes to get inside bicep ties, he can't get his wrist to my biceps or his hands to my biceps. So when you go to pummel your arms inside, take your wrists tight to your body and bring them up toward your own shoulders, as opposed to bring your arms up in a way that exposes your bicep to your opponent. So we're here, inside, I take my wrists up my body, and I pull in with my knees as I use my hands to take Graydon's arms out and away from the center line because I have inside position and inside control. I complete the knee pull, and now I want to keep his posture locked down. So I'm going to hug his his neck, elbow deep, and I take an inside bicep tie with my right arm. When I take an inside bicep tie, it's very important that my elbow remains in the inside position. If my elbow goes outside of his arm, he can easily pummel in. So my hand, while it's on the outside position, my elbow retains the inside position. And it's very important that we learn to follow his arm. From here, Graydon wants to pummel his arm inside, go ahead, and get inside bicep tie. So if I see him doing that, I need to drop my elbow. So when he goes to swim inside, there's nothing there for him. If he tries to go over the top, we can flare the elbow, and we track his arm. Now we're almost ready to set up the clamp. The last thing I want to do is I want to perform a knee shrimp to get on my right hip. If I'm flat on my back, getting to the clamp is not easy. So I use my left knee to shrimp against his body to move myself onto my right hip. Now that I'm on my right hip, it's very easy for me to take my right knee inside of Graydon's arm, and I connect knee and elbow together here, my right knee and my right elbow. Now, I want to keep Graydon's posture controlled, but I also want to be able to take my chest away to start removing my right leg. If I bring my chest away, I can no longer hold his head with my arm. So, the way I control the posture is as I'm bringing my chest away, my left heel comes and I clamp over the far shoulder here, right in front of the shoulder. Now, this is going to keep more weight over Graydon's head. But if Graydon starts pushing his left hand off the floor, he can go to start posturing up. Okay? So this hand is a problem and can help him posture. If I see Graydon starting to posture with that hand, I use my right shin and I extend my right leg to take his hand off the mat. Graydon goes to posture, I take the hand off the mat, and I can put his head back down. I'm just going to scoot a little bit. I'm getting a little out of frame. So we're here. So this hand's on the floor, that's a problem for me. I just use my right shin here to lift his elbow, and now I can drop his head again. If I try to drop his head right now, his hand is a good base of support. I'm trying to lean all my weight to my right hand side and make my left leg very heavy. But once I take his arm out, now I lean, I can break his posture very easy. And that is our clamp position. My heel and knee are connected close together. When Graydon goes to swim this arm back to the inside position, it's hard to do so, he's shut up on my legs. And now from here it's going to be very easy to start going into attacks. The first one that we're going to look at is going to be the triangle. Let's just briefly look at setting up the clamp again, and then we'll get into our submissions. So from this position, Graydon's doing a good job of framing against my body. I can't knee pull. I take inside position with my wrists come up to body as I knee pull, and break his posture. I control his head elbow deep so he can't posture up, and I keep an inside bicep tie with my right arm. If Graydon tries to pummel that arm to the inside position, I use my inside bicep tie to trap his arm. Now from here, my left leg helps me get an angle and get onto my right hip by performing a knee shrimp. I take my knee in front of the bicep, and then I connect heel and knee together to establish the clamp. If at any point Graydon starts pushing off the mat, I take that hand off the mat, and I drop his head back down. So that's how we get into our clamp position. Now let's start looking at some attacks out of here. There's going to be numerous attacks. We can go into the trap triangle and finish from the trap triangle. The number one finish from the trap triangle is always going to be the front triangle, but we also have arm locks from there. We also have reverse arm bars on the near arm that we can go into. We have Kimura locks on the near arm that we can go into. We have belly down arm bars on the near arm that I can roll belly down to go into the near arm. Or if I bring my foot in front of the face, I can go into Omoplatas as well. So let's look at some of these attacks. So first, I get to the clamp position here. I'm going to use my left heel against the shoulder to extract my right leg. If I don't put my heel in front of the shoulder, if my heel is here on top of his back, and I go to pull my bottom leg out, it doesn't come out anywhere near as easy. But watch how when I use my left heel to drive and extend his shoulder away, that gives me the room that I need to take my leg out. Now I bite his neck with the back of my knee. That's very important. When I go to lock up the triangle, I don't just go here and leave a bunch of space where Graydon can pummel inside. Also, not only does that leave space where you can pummel inside, it doesn't connect to his neck very well. And then, since it's a choke, we want a good, strong connection to the neck to close off the neck, the airway and the arteries. So, I extract my leg, and now I use the back of my knee to bite tight to his neck. Now when Greg goes to swim his arm inside, there's not really room to do so. My left hand goes to a collar tie to control the posture. Alternatively, you can control your shin right here, you grab. I like collar ties. My right hand is going to go to get a scoop grip to help me get an angle. So I go inside the leg just like so, and this scoop grip is going to pull me perpendicular to my opponent. As I pull myself perpendicular, my hips come off the mat, and I turn my right knee in toward his hips and down to the ground. That allows me to bite his neck with the back of my knee. If my knee is higher than his ear, now I'm going to be biting on the back of the neck. I don't want to choke the back of the neck. There's no air, there's no blood back there. We want to choke the front of the neck. So my hips come up, and I get an angle, so my knee goes from facing the ceiling to facing the floor, pointing down. Now from here, my left knee comes in and wedges behind Braden's head, and I start to scissor my legs to take all the space out first. Now that all the space is taken out, now I can lock my finger 4, I bite down, give a squeeze, and we have our choke. So that's the first technique out of the clamp, the triangle. And once I get to the triangle, there are other things I can do. I'll show you all the way from the beginning, actually. That way people can see this numerous times. Inside position, pull. Here, we shrimp. I get to the clamp. Once again, I can extract my leg. Now, rather than biting the neck with the back of my knee and switching to the other side, I keep my heel right here in front of the shoulder, and I lock the triangle on that side. Now from here, I can attack this arm. If he leaves that arm hanging out, I can just lock the Kimura straight away. Most people are going to hide that arm inside his thigh. Okay, so he's grabbing the inside of his thigh like so. From here, let's rotate this straight up. So I'd set up this position here. He tucks his arm inside the thigh, I can't get it. To get the wrist out, I need to expose the wrist. I'm going to do so by planking up on the points of my shoulders. My elbows up to my shoulder line. I plank my body up, and that starts to pull this wrist out. Now I grab the wrist, dropping my hips, and I can grab my Kimura grip. Now once I have the Kimura grip, I want to tighten everything up and bring everything onto the bottom power line. There's a top power line for a Kimura, the power line when we're in top position, and there's a bottom power line, the power line when we're in bottom position. The power line, right there, I want your shoulder line right here. Run shoulder to elbow to head. All of these things should be on the same trajectory, the same line. So when I lock this, and I get the wrist, Kimura grip, my first thing is to pull his elbow into my right armpit. By taking his elbow into my right armpit, that starts to tighten everything up considerably. Now from here, I'm just going to pull my right arm down through his elbow, trying to force his elbow down to the floor. And we have a very, very fast submission. The act of drawing that elbow up to the shoulder line really tightens things up. So we have the front triangle and we have the Kimura out of the clamp. Next, let's look at the reverse arm bar. Let's go back to our original orientation. So once again, I take inside. What if he has inside bicep ties? If he has inside bicep ties, that's fine. I take my arms over my head like we did before. I grab the wrist, and I come inside. Now I have inside position. My right arm is also going to come to the inside position. If I need to, I might be able to just swim inside. If I can, awesome. If not, I'm just going to use my left hand, and I'm going to cross peel that hand as well, inside position. Okay, so again there, real quick. It's basically the same thing, but now we need to cross peel, meaning I need to use my hand to peel the cross wrist. Inside position, cross peel, inside position, and we have our inside position. Now we shrimp out, and we get to our clamp position here. Now again, some other attacks we have out here, let's look at the reverse arm bar on the near arm. So my legs are going to keep his head stuck. If he tries to posture up, I use my my leg to take his arm out to keep his head low. My left arm is going to swim underneath of Graydon's arm. I hold the elbow so he can't free his arm, and I swim underneath, pulling his wrist up to my neck. I'm going to cover his elbow with my elbow. I take the crook of my elbow right on top of Graydon's elbow, and then I physically hold my own elbow here. Now, most people will just squeeze the elbow to their chest, and you can get submissions that way, but it's not the best option. We don't want to try to finish with our upper body muscles. We want to try to finish with our lower body muscles, the stronger muscles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my feet, put them into the floor, and I'm going to start to shrimp my hips. As I do so, my elbow is going to keep his elbow hugged tight to my body, and as I shrimp, it's the act of my legs and my hips shrimping away that's helping to crack that elbow in half or bend the arm in half. So we're here, once again, pushing away. You can either push off the floor as I showed the first time, or this time, I use my right leg pushing against his armpit over here. That also helps. I'm in here to move my hips, and we get a nice tight reverse arm bar where I'm actually pulling the elbow to me with my elbow rather than driving his elbow away from me with my hips. Okay? We also have a belly down arm bar. So however Graydon chooses to put his hand in my body, here he's chosen in the ribs. So I go inside position, wrists come up toward my body, and we get to our clamp. Okay? Now, next one I was going to show, what did I just say? Belly down arm bar, thank you. So maybe during the course of trying to do this reverse arm bar, okay, I feel like he starts to slip the wrist goes over my head. No worry, now I'm just going to drive my right toes into the floor to lift my hips up. I take my shin in behind his head, and I roll all the way belly down and ultimately down to my left shoulder. From here I can either break the arm, otherwise, if Graydon tries to hop over my body, I catch the leg, I turn him over, cover the head, and now we have an arm bar right here. I'll show that again. I think we went out of frame too right. That's okay. So from the clamp, if I go for this inverted arm bar and that arm goes past my head, now I can put my foot on the floor, drive my hips up, I cover his head with my knee, rolling belly down. I can either stay on my left side and I can break the arm right here. Otherwise, if Graydon tries to hop over, I grab the leg, cover the head, and we have a break right here. Now, let's go into the Omoplata off this position. I'm here. He goes inside bicep tie, so I need to use cross peeling. I go up, inside position, knee pulling, breaking the posture, and we get to our clamp. Now from here, maybe Graydon's starting to pull his head away from me. If I see him pulling his head away, that leaves space between my head and his head. It's very easy for me to take my left foot and flip it from the far shoulder to the near shoulder. Now from here, I'm just going to straighten my legs out. I'm going to try to take his shoulder down to the floor. Now, there's going to be a battle for head height here. Graydon wants to posture up and get his head high and force me on my back, forcing me into this position, keeping my head low. I'm going to be straightening my leg, trying to stay heavy over his shoulder with my leg and hips. Here. Now when Graydon goes to posture up, if I can keep my head up, he keeps his low. I can have better leverage by keeping my leg out here a little closer to the elbow. Now he goes to posture up, I'm hanging off the longer lever. I'm going to immediately cover the hips, and I want space between my hips and his hips. So that makes it even harder for him to posture up. If I'm in here super tight and Graydon drives his head up, he might send me back. So I cover the hips, I scoot here. Now when Graydon goes to posture up, it's hard. Okay. Now from here, I'm going to cover his elbow. I grab his elbow with my hand, and I cover his elbow with my calf muscle here. Now everything's going to turn across the body. I don't sit forward. Rather, I post my foot up here. I'm going to start turning perpendicular to Graydon here. And then one last thing, if I sit up like that and there's still no tap, I can use my left leg to physically pull his elbow. So as I come up, I can use my left leg to physically pull his elbow back as I sit across the body. You don't have to use the hand on the elbow, that's just an option. You can also choose to go to lock a seatbelt. I can come up, I can lock a seatbelt, and now my left leg is going to start to pull his elbow back, and we have a submission there. Let's come back a little bit, Greg. Go this way. And then oftentimes, honestly, it's going to be hard to get the omoplata submission on anybody good, but what it will do is it'll force your opponent into a rolling action to alleviate the pressure. But now I get inside the hip, and I can come up into the top position, and now I'm ready to go into the mount, score points, and go after the submission. Okay? So a lot of great things off that. We saw a couple different ways to get into the clamp out of some favored positions that our opponents are going to take, either hands in the ribs or hands in the biceps. We get to the clamp. Then out of the clamp, we have a ton of opportunities. We saw how we can transition into the triangle and finish with the choke. We saw how we can transition into the opposite triangle and then finish with the Kimura. Remember, we lift our hips to extract the wrist, very important in the Kimura. And then we draw the elbow to the shoulder line. We saw how we can go into a reverse armbar where I hug the arm into my body. We saw how we can turn belly down, going into a belly down armbar. And now we saw how we can bring our leg in front of the face and go into an omoplata. These are not the only options out of the clamp. These are just some good options to get you started on the right road. I want you guys to continue to work the clamp, experiment with it, and figure out what kind of game and attacks you like out of there. But the big thing that I'm trying to impart to you is that before we attack from the closed guard, we first need to set up some sort of position of advantage. We've looked at the side scissor, taking the elbow across the center line. We've looked at the top lock, taking the elbow to the center line. Now, if we can't get the elbow in toward the center line, we take it out and away from the center line with the clamp position. And that clamp position has a ton of submission opportunities, has some good sweeping opportunities, and it's a pretty dominant position. Even though it's the closed guard, and we're still in the closed guard, and it's technically still neutral, you still do have a measure of dominance over your opponent from the clamp with which you can go and start launching your submission attacks. Make it a strong part of your game. It's one of my favorites. Coach Graydon has actually been using the clamp very well throughout the last couple months. During our half guard, I've seen him do a lot of good things from the clamp, and I'm hoping that in the coming weeks, you guys will also develop a strong clamp